All right, so we're back, and the last time that we left off, there was a lot of anticipation building up to Harry's birthday. And I think Harry and the Dursleys were on an abandoned island somewhere in this shack. But we know someone's looking for Harry, and I think we're going to find out. So, Chapter 4, The Keeper of the Keys. Boom, they knocked again. Dudley jerked awake. "Where's the cannon?" he said stupidly. There was a crash behind them, and Uncle Vernon came skidding into the room. He was holding a rifle in his hands. Now, they knew what had been in the long, thin package he brought with them. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I warn you, I'm armed." There was a pause, then smash. The door was hit with such a force that it swung clean off its hinges. With a deafening crash, it landed flat on the floor. A giant of a man was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane of hair and a wild, tangled beard. But you could make out his eyes, glinting like black beetles under all the hair. The giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooping so that his head just brushed against the ceiling. He bent down and picked up the door and fitted it easily back into its frame. The noise of the storm outside dropped a little. He turned and looked at all of them. "Couldn't you make us a cup of tea, could you? It's not been an easy journey." He strode over to the sofa where Dudley sat frozen with fear. "Budge up, you great lump," said the stranger. Dudley squeaked and ran to hide behind his mother, who was crouching, terrified, behind Uncle Vernon. "And here's Harry," said the giant. Harry looked up into the fierce, wild, shadowy face and saw that the beetle eyes were crinkled in a smile. "Last time I saw you, you was only a baby," said the giant. "You looked a lot like your dad, but you've got your mom's eyes." Uncle Vernon made a funny, rasping noise. "I demand that you leave, sir, at once," he said. "You are breaking and entering." "Ah, shut up, Dursley, you great prune," said the giant. He reached over the back of the sofa, jerked the gun out of Uncle Vernon's hands, bent it into a knot, easily, as if it had been made by rubber, and he threw it in the corner of the room. Uncle Vernon made another funny noise, like a mouse being trodden on. "Anyway, Harry," said the giant, turning his back to the Dursleys, "a very happy birthday to you. Got something for you here. I might have sat on it at some point, but it's all right. It'll taste all right." From an inside pocket of his black overcoat, he pulled out a slightly squashed box. Harry opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake with "Happy Birthday, Harry" written on it in green icing. Harry looked up at the giant. He meant to say thank you, but the words got lost on the way to his mouth. And what he said instead was, "Who are you?" The giant chuckled. "True, I haven't introduced myself. Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of the keys and grounds at Hogwarts." He held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. "What about that tea then, eh?" he said, rubbing his hands together. "I'd not say no to something stronger if you got it, mind you." His eyes fell on the empty gate with the shriveled bag of chips in it, and he snorted. He bent down over the fireplace. They couldn't see what he was doing, but when he drew back a second later, there was a roaring fire in there. It filled the whole damp hut with flickering light, and Harry felt the warmth that washed over him as though he had sunk into a hot bath. The giant sat back down on the sofa, which sagged under his weight, and he began taking all sorts of things out of his pockets of his coat. A copper kettle, a squashy package of sausages, a poker, a teapot, several chip mugs, and a bottle of some amber liquid that he took a swig from before starting to make the tea. Soon the hut was full of the sound and smell of sizzling sausage. Nobody said a thing while the giant was working, but as he slid the first 6 fat, juicy, slightly burnt sausages from the poker, Dudley fidgeted a little. Uncle Vernon said sharply, "Do not touch anything he gives you, Dudley." The giant chuckled darkly. "Your great puddin' of a son don't need fattening any more, Dursley. Don't worry." Huh. So this is a little hard to read because Hagrid has an accent and they cut a lot of his words. So I find myself when I'm reading Hagrid like having to go back. So he said, "Your great puddin' of a son don't need fattening anymore, Dursley, don't worry." But a lot of his words are cut off. So I have to think about what he's saying and kind of go back and then try to read it with his accent a little bit. By the way, representing Ravenclaw today with the scarf. We haven't gotten there yet, but we will. He passed the sausages to Harry, who was so hungry he had never tasted anything so wonderful, but he still couldn't take his eyes off the giant. Finally, as nobody seemed to be able to explain anything, he said, "I'm sorry, but I still really don't know who you are." The giant took a gulp of tea and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Call me Hagrid," he said. "Everyone does. And like I told you, I'm the keeper of the keys at Hogwarts. Y'all know about Hogwarts, of course." "No," said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. "Sorry," said Harry quickly. "Sorry," barked Hagrid, turning a stare to the Dursleys who shrank into the back of the shadows. "It's them that should be sorry. I knew you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought you wouldn't know about Hogwarts, for crying out loud. Did you ever wonder where your parents learned it all?" "All what?" asked Harry. "All what?" Hagrid thundered. "Now just wait 1 second." He leapt to his feet. In his anger, he seemed to fill the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against a wall. "Do you mean to tell me," he growled at the Dursley, "that this boy, knows nothing about anything?" Harry thought this was going a bit far. He had been to school after all, and his marks weren't really that bad. "I know some things," he said. "I can, do math and stuff." But Hagrid simply waved his hand and said, "About our world. I mean, your world, my world, your parents' world." "What world?" Hagrid looked as if he was about to explode. "Dursley," he boomed. Uncle Vernon, who had gone very pale, whispered something that sounded like Mimblewimble. Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. "But you must know about your mom and dad," he said. "I mean, they're famous. You're famous." "What? My mom and dad were famous? They weren't famous, were they?" You don't know. Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing at Harry with a bewildered stare. That's an interesting word, bewildered. Maybe that's something we'll look at later. "You don't know what you are," he said finally. Uncle Vernon finally found his voice. "Stop," he commanded. "Stop right there, sir. I forbid you to tell the boy anything." A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quailed under the furious look Hagrid now gave him. When Hagrid spoke, his every syllable trembled with rage. You never told him what was in the letter that Dumbledore left for him. I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley, and you've kept it from him all these years." "Kept what from me?" Harry said eagerly. "Stop. I forbid you," yelled Uncle Vernon in a panic. Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror. "Ah, go boil your heads, both of you," said Hagrid. "Harry, you're a wizard." That's a big line from the movie. There was a silence inside the hut. Only the sea and the whistling wind could be heard. "I'm a what?" gasped Harry. "A wizard, of course," said Hagrid, sitting back down on the sofa, which groaned and sank even lower. "And a thumping good one, I'd say, once you've been trained up a bit. With a mom and a dad like yours, what else would you be? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter." Harry stretched out his hand at last to take the yellowish envelope addressed in emerald green to Mr. H. Potter, the floor, hut on the rock, the sea. He pulled out the letter and read, "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster Albus Dumbledore. Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Sorcerer, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confederacy of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find an enclosed list of all the necessary books and equipment. Term begins September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. All right, so we got a lot going on there. It's in letter format. I don't know if you can really see that so much, but there's a letter that Harry got, and it seems like he's been invited to school, a school of witchcraft and wizardry, which is very exciting. And they're awaiting his owl. I don't know about that. Gotta find out what that means, awaiting his owl. Usually when you're going to school, you announce that, right? You have to send them your response. But they're asking him to send his owl. Questions exploded inside Harry's head like a firework, and he couldn't decide which question to ask first. After a few minutes, he stammered, "What does it mean they await my owl?" "Galloping Gorgons, that reminds me," said Hagrid, clapping a hand to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart horse. And from yet another pocket inside his overcoat, he pulled out an owl, a real live, rather ruffled-looking owl, a long quill and a roll of parchment. With his tongue between his teeth, he scribbled a note that Harry could read upside down. Dear Professor Dumbledore, given Harry his letter, taking him to buy his things tomorrow. Weather's horrible. Hope you are well. Hagrid. So right now I'm making a text-to-self connection because Emily got invitations, not to the School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. She's not that cool. She's pretty cool. But she got all these invitations to all these art schools where she's going to go to college. And so she has to send her owl, which she kind of did already. And now we have to go buy all of her things for school too. So just like Harry Potter, Emily will be leaving home to go to school to learn magical things. Personal connection break over. All right. Hagrid rolled up the note, gave it to the owl, which clamped it in his beak. And he went to the door and he threw the owl out into the storm. Then he came back and sat down. This was as normal as talking on the telephone. Harry realized his mouth was wide open, and he closed it quickly. Where was I? Said Hagrid. But at that moment, Uncle Vernon, still ashen-faced, but looking very angry, moved into the firelight. He's not going. Hagrid grunted. I'd like to see a great muggle like you stop him, said Hagrid. What? Harry insisted. A muggle, said Hagrid. It's what we call the non-magic folk like them. And it's your bad luck that you grew up with a family of the biggest muggles I've ever laid eyes on. We swore when we took him in, we'd put a stop to this rubbish, said Uncle Vernon. We swore we'd stamp it out of him. Wizard indeed. You knew? Said Harry. You knew I'm a wizard? Knew, shrieked Aunt Petunia suddenly. Knew? Of course we knew. How could you not be? My dratted sister being what she was. Oh, she got a letter just like that, and then she disappeared off to that school, and then she came home every vacation with her pockets full of frog spawn, turning teacups into rats. I was the only one who saw her for what she was, a freak. But for my mother and father, oh no, it was Lily this and Lily that. They were so proud of having a witch in the family. Sounds like Aunt Petunia's a little bit jealous. She stopped to draw a deep breath and then went on ranting. It seemed like she had been wanting to say all this for years. Then she met that Potter at school and they ran off and they got married and they had you. And of course, I knew you'd just have to be the same. Just as strange, just as abnormal. And then, if you please, she went and she got herself blown up and we got landed with you. Harry had gone very white. As soon as he found his voice, he said, "Blown up? You said they died in a car crash." Car crash, roared Hagrid, jumping angrily, and the Dursleys scuttled back into their corner. How could a car crash kill James and Lily Potter? It's an outrage, a scandal. Harry Potter, not knowing his own story when every kid in our world would know his name. But why? What happened? Harry asked urgently. The anger faded from Hagrid's face. He suddenly looked anxious. I never expected this, he said in a low, worried voice. I had no idea when Dumbledore told me there might be trouble getting a hold of you. How much you didn't know. Harry, I don't know if I'm the right person to tell you, but someone's got to tell you. You can't go off to Hogwarts not knowing. He threw a dirty look at the Dursleys. Well, it's best you know as much as I can tell you. Mind you, I can't tell you everything. It's a great mystery, parts of it. He sat down, stared into the fire for a few seconds, and then said, It begins, I suppose, with a person called... But it's incredible you don't know his name. Everyone in our world knows. Who? Well, I don't like saying his name if I can help it. No one does. Why not? Gulping gargoyles, Harry. People are still scared. Blimey, this is difficult. See, there was this wizard who went bad. As bad as you could go. Worse than worse. And his name was... Hagrid gulped, but no words came out. Could you write it down? Harry suggested. Nah, can't spell it. All right, Voldemort. Hagrid shuddered. Don't make me say it again. Anyways, this wizard, about 20 years ago now, started looking for followers. Got 'em too. Some were afraid. Some just wanted a bit of his power, 'cause he was getting himself power all right. Dark days, Harry. Didn't know who to trust. Didn't dare get friendly with a strange wizard or witches. Terrible things happened. He was taken over. Of course, some stood up to him, and he killed him. Horribly. One of the only safe places left was Hogwarts. Reckon Dumbledore's the only one you-know-who was afraid of. He didn't dare try taking the school. Not just then, anyway. Now, your mom and dad were as good as a witch and wizard as I ever knew. Head boy and girl at Hogwarts in their day. Suppose the mystery is why you-know-who never tried to get him on his side before. Probably knew they were too close to Dumbledore to want anything to do with the dark side. Maybe he thought he could persuade him. Maybe he just wanted them out of the way. All anyone knows is he turned up in the village where you was all living on Halloween 10 years ago. You were just a year old. He came to your house and... Hagrid suddenly pulled out a very dirty, spotted handkerchief, and he blew his nose with a sound like a foghorn. Sorry, he said, but it's sad. Knew your mom and dad and nicer people you couldn't find. Anyway, you know who killed him. And this is the real mystery of the thing, he tried to kill you too. Wanted to make a clean job of it, I suppose. Or maybe he just liked killing by then. But he couldn't do it. Never wondered how you got that mark on your forehead? That was no ordinary cut. That's what you get when a powerful evil curse touches you. Took care of your mom and dad and your house even. But it didn't work on you. And that's why you're famous. And Odin does not like that part of the story. No. Or he doesn't like a dog outside that he equates to being Voldemort and putting the house in danger. Yes. All right. Harry, no one ever lived after he decided to kill him. No one except you. And he killed some of the best wizards and witches that I knew. The McKinnons, the Bones, the Pruitts, and you was only a baby and you lived. Something very painful was going on in Harry's mind. As Hagrid's story came to a close, he saw again the blinding flash of green light, more clearly than he'd ever remembered it before. And he remembered something else. For the first time in his life, a high, cold, cruel laugh. Hagrid was watching him sadly. Took you from the ruined house myself, on Dumbledore's orders. Brought you here to this lot. Load of old tosh, said Uncle Vernon. Harry jumped. He had almost forgotten that the Dursleys were there. Uncle Vernon certainly seemed to have got back his courage. He was glaring at Hagrid with his fist clenched. Now you listen here, boy, he snarled. I accept there's something strange about you. Probably nothing a good beating wouldn't have cured. And for all this stuff about your parents, well, they were weirdos. No denying it, and the world's better off without them, in my opinion. As for what they got, getting mixed up with those wizarding types, just what I expected. They'd come to a sticky end, and they did. But at that moment, Hagrid leapt from the sofa and drew a battered pink umbrella from inside his coat, pointing this at Uncle Vernon like a sword. He said, I'm warning you, Dursley, I'm warning you, one more word. In danger of being speared on the end of an umbrella by a bearded giant, Uncle Vernon's courage failed again. He flattened himself against the wall and fell silent. That's better, said Hagrid, breathing heavily and sitting back down on the sofa, which this time sagged right down onto the floor. Meanwhile, Harry still had questions, hundreds of them. But what happened to Sorry, I mean, you know who? Good question, Harry. Disappeared, vanished. Same night as he tried to kill you. Makes you even more famous. That's the biggest mystery, see? He was getting more and more powerful, so why'd he go? Some say he died. Cold swallop, in my opinion. Don't know if he had enough human left in him to die. Some say he's still out there, biding his time. But I don't believe it. People who was on his side came back to ours. Some of them came out of like trances, kind of. Don't reckon they could have if he was coming. They don't reckon they could have if he was coming back. Most of us reckon he's still out there somewhere but lost his powers, too weak to carry on. 'Cause something about you finished him, Harry. There was something going on that night that he hadn't counted on. I don't know what it was. No one does. But there's something about you that stumped him all right. Hagrid looked at Harry with warmth and respect blazing in his eyes. But Harry, instead of feeling pleased and proud, felt quite sure there had been a horrible mistake. A wizard? Him? How could he possibly be? He'd spent his life being clouded by Dudley and bullied by Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. If he was really a wizard, why hadn't they been turned into warty toads every time they tried to lock him in the cupboard? If he'd once defeated the greatest sorcerer in the world, how come Dudley had always been able to kick him around like a football? So I understand Harry has some doubts here, but we also know that weird things did happen to Harry, right? Like they cut his hair and all his hair grew back, and he had the incident with the snake. So I don't think it's a mistake. I think Harry's a wizard. Let's see what's going on here. Hagrid, he said quickly, I think you must have made a mistake. I don't think I can be a wizard. To his surprise, Hagrid chuckled. Not a wizard, eh? Never made things happen when you were scared or angry? Harry looked into the fire. Now he came to think about it. Every odd thing that ever made his aunt and uncle furious with him had happened when he, Harry, had been upset or angry. Chased by Dudley's gang, he had somehow found himself out of their reach. Dreading going to school with that ridiculous haircut, his hair managed to grow back. And the very last time Dudley had hit him, hadn't he gotten his revenge without even realizing he was doing it? He hadn't set that boa constrictor on him. Did he? Harry looked back at Hagrid, smiling, and he saw that Hagrid was positively beaming at him. See, said Hagrid. Harry Potter, not a wizard. You wait. You'll be right famous at Hogwarts. But Uncle Vernon wasn't going to give in without a fight. Haven't I told you he's not going? He hissed. He's going to Stonewall High, and he'll be grateful for it. I've read those letters, and he needs all sorts of rubbish, spell books and wands. If he wants to go, a great muggle like you won't stop him, growled Hagrid. Stop Lily James's Potter son from going to Hogwarts. You're mad. His name's been down ever since he was born. He's off to the finest school of witchcraft and wizardry in the world. Several years there and he won't even know himself. He'll be with youngsters of his own sort for a change, and he'll be under the greatest headmaster Hogwarts has ever had, Albus Dumbledore. I am not paying for some crackpot old fool to teach him magic tricks, yelled Uncle Vernon. But he had finally gone too far. Hagrid seized his umbrella and whirled it over his head. Never, he thundered, never insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me. He bought the umbrella, swishing down into the air, pointed it at Dudley, and there was a flash of violet light, a sound like a firecracker, and a sharp little squeal, and the next second, Dudley was dancing on the spot with his hands clasped over his fat bottom, howling in pain. When he turned back to them, Harry saw a curly pig's tail poking through a hole in his trousers. Uncle Vernon roared, pulling Aunt Petunia and Dudley into another room. He cast one last terrified look at Hagrid and slammed the door behind them. Hagrid looked down at his umbrella and stroked his beard. Shouldn't have lost my temper, he said ruefully. But it didn't work anyway. Meant to turn him into a pig. But I suppose he was so much like a pig anyway that there wasn't much left to do. He cast a sideways look at Harry under his eyebrows. Be grateful if you didn't mention that to anyone back at Hogwarts, he said. I'm not supposed to do magic, strictly speaking. I was allowed to do it a bit, follow you and get your letters and all that kind of stuff. One of the reasons I was so keen to take the job, but really not, supposed to. Why aren't you supposed to do magic? Harry asked. Oh, well, I was at Hogwarts myself, but I got expelled, to tell you the truth. In my 3rd year, they snapped me wand in half and everything. But Dumbledore let me stay on as his gamekeeper. He's a great man, Dumbledore. Why are you expelled? It's getting late, and we've got lots to do tomorrow, said Hagrid loudly. Gotta get up and get to town and get your books and all that. He took off his thick black coat and threw it at Harry. You can kip under that, he said. Don't mind if it wriggles a bit. I think I still got a couple of dormice in one of the pockets. So Harry's got a coat with some mice in his pockets. Wouldn't be so exciting for me, but it's exciting new world for Harry. He learned he's a wizard. He's going to be going to a new school. He's going to start learning all sorts of new stuff. So that is the chapter that had tons of 11-year-olds waiting for their 11th birthday so that they could get letters and get their owls. Some not so lucky. But some did get stuffed owls, and they got to go to Hogwarts in Florida. That did happen for some lucky kids. A couple that I know. All right, so tomorrow is chapter 5. Speaking of Hogwarts in Florida, if you go to Universal Studios, there's, what's the first one called? Was it the Wizarding World of Harry Potter? That's the first one, and that has Hogwarts, and it has a bunch of stuff there. And Hogsmeade, that's it. Emily's whispering from the back. Hogsmeade. That was the first thing that Universal opened. And then the second one, which is really cool if you get to go, is this. I got it. I'm just slow. The second one is the Diagon Alley, which was even cooler than Hogsmeade. And that is our chapter 5. Our chapter 5 is called Diagon Alley. And Diagon Alley is a little preview, is a place where all the wizards kind of go shopping for their wands and robes and scarves and things like that. So Harry on his way to Diagon Alley with Hagrid, big giant, has a coat, mice in his pockets, crazy stuff going on. All right, we'll see you back for chapter 5.